Hi there, this is Ethan Alexanian, or at least the disembodied voice of Ethan Alexanian, host of Fans on the Run, podcast made by, for, and about Beatles fans. And you are listening to and watching I Know, a Solo Beatles videocast, with my main man, Hudson.
Hey there, Solo Beatle fans. Welcome back to another episode of I Know, a Solo Beatles video cast where we talk all things Solo Beatles. Now, today I have the co-host from one of my favorite Beatles podcasts of all time, Things We Said Today, and the author of The Beatles, A Rooftop to a Cavern Club, How I Want to Hold Your Hand Changed Everything. Allan Kozinn, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Can I just say something about the titles?
Yes.
It's actually two books. One is The Beatles from the Cavern to the Rooftop, and the other one, which is just about I Want to Hold Your Hand, is Got That Something, How the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand Changed Everything.
Okay, I totally got that messed up.
Happens.
Yeah. So today we are talking about the underrated, what we think is the most underrated album by each of the four solo Beatles. And this is going to be an interesting show. So, do you want to start off with your John pick?
Okay. So I had a little problem with the concept in a way, because underrated implies that there are really a lot of redeeming features about it. And in most cases, things that I think are underrated for a reason. Although I did find a couple of things that I think are underrated undeservedly. Most times I think they're underrated deservedly, which means in a way they're not underrated, they're just poorly rated. But for John, I chose Sometime in New York City.
Okay.
And I think that I think for the most part, that is properly rated as, maybe his, I don't want to say worst album, but most people's least favorite. That's assuming you're not counting the avant-garde things,
Yeah,
like
we,
For the Lions.
we all know Ken Michaels rates that as his favorite.
Yeah. The thing is that over the years, your attitude towards things change. And when Sometime in New York came out, or really properly Sometime in New York City, when that came out, uh, I really disliked it. And I was probably not a lot older than you, a few years. And I had a band, and I was writing my own stuff, and we were recording it, and doing that kind of thing. And it was the first time any of the Beatles put out something that I thought I was writing better stuff then. That's, a very sort of arrogant thing to say for someone my age at the time, but I really felt that, I understood what he wanted to do. And then, even having the sort of newspaper-like cover, he was pursuing his theory that music can be like journalism in a way. It can, comment on the events of the moment and then move on. It doesn't have to be music for, forever. It can be just throwaway, like a newspaper is.
Right.
And I wasn't really buying that. I felt that no, if you're bothering to record it and put it out, it really should be for the ages. Um, Nevertheless, is that on your?
Yes, it'll
Okay.
go away in the edited version.
Nevertheless, I think a lot of things on this album actually have stood up. And that includes some of Yoko's things. I guess another thing was that this was the first album, not counting the avant-garde ones, where John and Yoko really sort of shared the stage, as they would later on Double Fantasy. Um, And I wasn't really dead set against Yoko like so many people. I just felt that I didn't. It seemed to me that if you're giving me an album that John and Yoko are sharing, then I'm only getting half an album of John, um, and that wasn't really a good attitude either. I mean, John's attitude was, we both have things to say. We're both giving you this album, and if you accept it on those terms, I think it's easier to deal with. Um, the first track, woman is the nigger of the world. I mean, I don't know that anyone can even, back announce that on the radio now.
No, you wouldn't be able to.
You wouldn't be able to. And yet, what John's message was that he was trying to say is that women are, really badly treated and really badly regarded, and by men, and he was trying to make a statement. I think in today's atmosphere, it was maybe not as well thought out as he would have wanted it to be. But also times change, and in his time, you could just about say that. Even then, it wasn't going to get a lot of radio play. But it's, as a track, forgetting the title and the refrain, it's actually a really good track. It rocks.
I love that song. It really does. It's got a great beat. Aside
Yep.
from the title, which is misleading, I don't know why in the world he would use that, but it's a great song. It really is.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of why he used it is the shock of it, in a way.
Yeah.
And I know what he was getting at, and I think it was essentially a good message, to tell us that women need to be treated better, generally speaking, and that was all those years ago. And I think the progress has been fairly slow, but it's happening. Sisters Oh Sisters was a good follow-up to it in a way. I mean, it's Yoko's take on it.
Yeah.
Attica State didn't do anything for me, and it still basically doesn't. Excuse me. New York City, like the opening track, is a good hard rocker. I still like that track.
I love that song. It's probably in my top 5 Lennon solo songs.
Mm-hmm.
New York City. I mean, just that. And I like the reverb. It almost sounds like something that could have gone on the Dave Dexterized Capitol albums, which I still defend.
Okay.
Even though I grew up with the UK stuff.
That's interesting. Okay. Sunday Bloody Sunday, I think actually, in terms of dealing with the Irish situation, I think I thought Paul did a better job there. And
I think John's song is better, even though I don't like both of those songs.
Really. I suppose, with that goes Luck of the Irish. And I know that got a lot of criticism at the time from Irish people saying, so what are you saying? Our luck is that we always have to take all this, is that, and that obviously wasn't what he meant, but he was playing on the common phrase, the luck of the Irish. And and he says, you'd be sorry and wish you were dead. And, that not well thought through. John Sinclair, also, that was a topical throwaway song. Didn't really care for it that much. Angela, Yoko's song, was,
I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, and Born in a Prison, in a way, as we go through this, it almost looks like Yoko's songs are better than John's in some way.
That's how I feel with Double Fantasy to an extent, at some points.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. But I still like the John stuff, don't get me wrong.
Okay. And We're All Water, I thought was a great song too. I mean, it's actually very funny, and they had the picture on the cover of Nixon and Mao dancing naked.
Yeah.
That sort of goes with that song. And then we have the other disc, which I think is
I don't like that disc at all.
What?
I can't stand that disc. I can't
Hmm.
I can't remember a thing on it.
Interesting. I really like the Zappa side, but Zappa put it out himself in a different form.
Yeah.
It's a different mix, and he calls the long play out after "Well, Baby, Please Don't Go" a small eternity with Yoko Ono. I'm not sure, whether he got their permission to do that, whether they cared, or whatever it was. It was on his collection called Playground Psychotics. But so if you collect all this stuff, you need that one too, because different mix.
Yeah.
So excuse me. Just gotta. It's not COVID.
Okay, good.
I'm fully vaccinated too.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's this album. Is that enough to say about it, or do you?
Yeah, I think it. I could see why I didn't pick that one because I can see why people don't like it, even though I like it. And I don't think John released a bad album in his solo career. I even like rock and roll a lot. I don't understand why people don't like that. But
that was my runner-up.
Okay, interesting. We'll have to get to that.
Okay.
So my pick, which this is either my number 1 or number 2 favorite John Lennon album, Mind Games. Only the 2002 mix for me personally, because the 2010 mix and the original mix, all I can hear is you can't really hear any of the vocals, I feel like, and I hear every little thing, no pun intended, on this.
Okay.
Mind Games, tight as Asuma Sen, One Day at a Time doesn't do it for me. Bring on the Lucy, Intuition, Out the Blue, I Know the Namesake of this show, and Meat City, all I would give a 10 out of 10 to.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that in Meat City I do prefer the original kind of cluttered version. It just works better for me.
I suppose we'll eventually get a box set like the one that just came out for Plastic Ono Band that will have yet another mix. I think in both the mixes that Yoko put out in the 2000s and in these new box sets, of which there's only been, Imagine and Plastic Ono Band, plus the hits compilation. She has said really that one of her concerns is bringing out John's vocals.
Yeah.
It sounds like for you that really worked.
Yeah, it was like a whole different album for me personally.
Yeah.
A whole different album. And I even liked the original one at first. And I cannot wait for a vinyl version to this come out where I don't have to pay a liver for, which, I think the MoFi one is this 2002 mix, but don't fact check me on that. And it flows really well, even though I do think that there are 3 songs that are less, but I like them in the context of the album. I'm not a fan of John's falsetto voice, but I do enjoy the lyrics in One Day at a Time.
Okay.
Mind Games should have been a number 1 hit. I don't understand why it wasn't. I think Whatever Gets You Through the Night being his only number 1 hit is criminal, because I think that song's overrated.
Okay.
But that's my John pick, and I did an episode with Andy Nichols, the co-host of Two Legs, and we just praised this album.
Right. It's a good album. I kind of agree with you that with the possible exception of Sometime in New York, John didn't put out a bad album. I was really happy, hearing, Mind Games the first time I heard it, uh, that he was back in form, you
Yeah.
know, and so yeah, I mean those are good songs, and I like both of the mixes. I mean, I to me, um, so long as you can always get the original mix, all the other mixes simply give you a different perspective. And the thing is that John hated his voice, his singing,
Yeah.
and talk about underrated by the person who owned it. you know he had an incredible voice, and I think that Yoko's mixes that bring that voice out more, I think she's really doing him a service.
I agree. And I mean, I think that with the fallout of some time in New York City as a critical failure at that point, I think that he was like holding this in and he just released everything and released that even more with Walls and Bridges. Like, I feel like this album and Walls and Bridges are like sister albums, kind of the way 33 and a Third and the George Harrison album are sisters, I feel like.
Interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
so should we move on to Paul?
Yes. Ready
Okay.
for the tomatoes to be thrown?
Well, I don't know. I have two here that I could equally do. But in Paul's case, I think I found one that really is underrated by other people. And in past times may have been underrated by me too. And that is Red Rose Speedway.
Oh, I love that album. That was one of my picks. I could have picked like 10 Paul albums.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the thing about Paul albums. A lot of them age really well, and if you didn't like them when they came out, there are things to be found in them if you revisit them, and especially if you spend some time with them, which I've been doing lately because I'm working on this series of books, The McCartney Legacy. And volume one goes only up to 1973. It ends with Band on the Run just coming out. Um, and it's a long book.
I'm looking
um,
forward to that.
Thank you. It's now sometime in 2022, thanks to COVID and other things that have delayed progress on that. I mean, the book is finished. We filed it. And, in the course of it, we spent a lot of time. I'm saying we, my co-author's name is Adrienne Sinclair. And we spent a lot of time listening to the tracks, the separations, the outtakes, absolutely everything, pouring over paperwork and really trying to get a good idea of how he made these things. Because that is largely what the book is about. I mean, it's a biography too. It goes through, it tells you everything he was doing, but our real interest was in his creative life, you know. Um, Red Rose Speedway, uh, I think a lot of people don't like it, and the reasons they don't like it are not entirely Paul's fault. I really think that if he had been allowed to put out the double album he planned, it would have been much better received, because the double album has so much, this album was supposed to, first of all, be showing Wings as a group.
Yeah.
And so it had a couple of songs from Denny Lane. It had Seaside Woman from Linda. Um, and, there were an awful lot of tracks that were left. I mean, there were things that wouldn't have even fit on the double album.
Right.
And, when he ended up putting out over the years, this is a guy who stockpiles material and returns to it several years later, and may add a couple more tracks to it, put it away for another couple of years, add another couple of tracks. And for a while, the Red Rose Speedway outtakes sort of serve that purpose really well. But it's got some really good stuff. the big hit from it, My Love. Wait. Yeah. I never really liked My Love that much, except for Henry's guitar solo.
Okay.
Henry's guitar solo is so beautiful.
Okay.
And is that your favorite part of it?
No.
You just like the song?
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's an okay song as gooey love songs go. Um, I guess I'm just not a huge fan of gooey love songs. Um, I don't like silly love songs either.
Do you like Maybe I'm Amazed?
I love Maybe I'm Amazed.
Okay.
Maybe I'm Amazed is not gooey.
Well,
Maybe I'm Amazed is, it's focused, it's powerful, it's energetic, it's beautifully played as well. So the one thing that My Love has going for it is the beautifully played part. Um, and that was, I don't know, you probably know the story, but, Henry kept saying, look, I have an idea I want to do. And Paul kept saying, no, I want you to play the solo I wrote, which is kind of odd in a way. If this album is supposed to be showing Wings as a band, not
yeah.
as a McCartney project, that he wouldn't let his lead guitarist do his own solo. But
Exactly.
finally on the last take, Henry came up to him and said, please let me try it. You don't have to use it. Just let me try it, one take. And he allowed it. They did it in that one take. Paul loved it, and it stayed on the record. Oddly enough, later that year, they had exactly the same fight over Denny Lane's No Words. We were rehearsing in Scotland before going to Lagos, Nigeria to record Band on the Run. And this time Paul, excuse me, Paul was not relenting, and Henry quit. And that was that. And that's, that's a whole other story. But, there are other things about this album that are worth noting. All of this, the cover work, it's hard to see. I should have brought in the LP. He had this, he had some of this commissioned, and some of it he used existing works, but he knew the artist, whose name I'm forgetting at the moment. You have it at your fingertips?
No.
Eduardo Pelosi.
Yes.
I'm going to forget that. That was Stuart Sutcliffe's teacher in Germany. And so, the choice of artist even has, some Beatles history. And the cover was taken by
his best album cover.
Yeah, you like it?
Oh, love it.
And they have on the CD, they reproduce the Braille, Stevie, I love you, a little message to Stevie Wonder.
Yeah, I don't know if you know this, but I think in the US on the original LP, it's at the bottom. And wasn't it on the UK? It was on the top.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
It was on the bottom in the US. And they actually, when they were taking this cover, which was on the building of one of the newspapers in London, Linda went up there. They got the Harley and took the cover, but they were listening to Stevie Wonder the whole time. His what was then his most recent album. The whole time they were doing the shoot. So that's also another reason for the message on the back. They were just big Stevie Wonder fans. Okay, but now having trashed My Love, maybe I should find something of more redeeming value in it. But where? Okay, here we go. I kind of, what? Little Lamb Dragonfly. I love Little Lamb Dragonfly.
Oh, thank you. You've redeemed yourself. Oh, I don't have to call Kit and have her execute you anymore.
Well, Kit and I already disagree on press to play. So, yeah. Little Lamb Dragonfly is one of these songs that Paul wrote in different parts and then connected them. I mean, that's something that goes back to A Day in the Life and then the medley on side 2 of Abbey Road. It's something he does actually quite a lot. There are examples of it all through his discography. Little Lamb Dragonfly, I think, works especially well. It was recorded during the Ram sessions. Ram that's another case where they had an awful lot of leftovers. I mean, he recorded that from October until like March.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Yeah, but actually, those were really interesting sessions too. I mean, if not for the fact that Ram is these days so well respected, I would have chosen it just to be able to talk about Ram.
Yeah, 20 years ago, this would have been our picks for McCartney.
Yeah, when Ram came out, I didn't like it that much.
You didn't?
I really didn't. No. Here's something you also need to realize, and we get into this in the book a lot too. At the time, when the Beatles had just split up, and Paul had put out his album and his self-interview, and really seemed to be, I mean, we knew about Alan Klein, we knew about that dispute and all that, but in Paul's self-interview, which was really kind of dyspeptic. There was like, you plan to work with the Beatles again? No. It just seemed like, okay, he was the one walking out, and okay, it doesn't matter. I mean, we already knew that Lennon wanted to walk out first. I mean, he mentioned stuff like that in interviews.
Yeah.
So, okay, they're breaking up, but it seemed that Lennon was putting out, hard-hitting, well-focused stuff that actually seemed to deal with big issues, even on Sometime in New York. You could not like Sometime in New York, but it's not like he's not dealing with issues.
Right.
And Paul was putting out, Mary Had a Little Lamb, and in the press, and I particularly mean Rolling Stone, but also, Rolling Stone was considered such a sort of hip lodestar in those days, that their opinion carried an incredible amount of weight. And so also DJs in New York, where I grew up, you got the idea, generally speaking, that everybody was a John person and not a Paul person. You knew there were Paul people out there. I didn't personally know any of them. But me and my friends were all John people. And so Paul had to work extra hard to impress us, and it didn't, generally speaking, happen until Band on the Run at the time. Looking back now, and especially having sort of spent an awful lot of time with Ram and Red Rose Speedway recently, I think of them in a completely different way. But Little Lamb Dragonfly, which, when it came out, I just shrugged off. It is so beautiful.
It is.
And it's, partly, I think the reason that it worked for him to join these two song bits together is that they both had to do with animals. I mean, one was about this dying lamb, you've probably heard him tell the story.
Yeah.
And the other was, he was sort of looking out his window at his farm in Scotland, and there was a dragonfly hovering out there. And so, it doesn't take much for Paul to, get an idea for a song. So he has this dialogue or a monologue with the dragonfly, and it's also a monologue with the lamb. And so those two went together. Recorded them during the Ram sessions, had George Martin do orchestration for it, which was also recorded during the Ram sessions in the same group of sessions when they did Uncle Albert and the other orchestrated things. And for some reason, it just didn't get on. But it's one of the hits of this album for me.
It is.
Yeah. The medley, I hear a lot of people trashing the medley. I think
I love it.
Yeah, I think the medley is okay. And there are some interesting little tidbits about that too. I mean, Power Cut was written during that university tour,
Yeah.
and there really was a power cut. And the story, I don't know if this is one you've heard before, but I don't think I had run into it before we were working on the book. Was that he was staying in a hotel, I can't remember which city, and Jose Feliciano was also at the hotel. And the power, because there was a strike going on in labor negotiations, the power was going on and off at various times. And Jose Feliciano idolized Paul and was brought over to Paul's table to meet him. And right then, when he met him, the lights went out, and then, everyone's saying, "Oh, the lights are out." And Jose Feliciano says to Paul, "Don't worry, I'll get you back to your room." So, anyway, let's see what else we got here. One More Kiss isn't bad. It's Get on the Right Thing I kind of like.
Love that.
Yeah. Most of the songs that ended up on the single disc version, I think work pretty well. And as I read the track titles, I'm also thinking of what we wrote about the sessions, and the sessions were kind of rough.
Yeah.
He didn't have a real idea of what he wanted to do, and Glyn Johns was there producing it, and he'd worked with them on the Get Back, Let It Be sessions, but he was not at all impressed with, first of all, the rest of Wings. He didn't think Paul had a worthy band, and he told them that. He told the other Wings players that they were telling him, we're just recording, what interests us, and he said to them, yeah, well, when you do something interesting, then we'll have a track. But they were experimenting a lot, Loop, First Indian on the Moon, another track that is trashed a lot.
I love it.
I kind of like it. You like it too?
Oh, love it.
Yeah. I like when he gets experimental.
I do too.
He, the only thing he did before this that you could call experimental, really, well, two things, both on the first album, were Glasses and Krina Kore, the attempt to capture, without quite mimicking, the sound of the Brazilian Indian tribe that I don't know if you saw the program about the Krina Kore. Paul watched a TV special about this tribe the special was called The Tribe That Hides from Man. And it was a completely unsociable tribe. They didn't deal with any other tribes, let alone people coming to make documentaries about them. And they were fierce. You got near them, they'd kill you. And so they were using tribes that had, a little bit of a relationship with them to try and come to terms with them. Anyway, Paul watched that documentary, and the very next day, or maybe 2 days later, he turned up in the studio and wanted to do this thing with, they set up microphones so he went to Harrods and bought a bow and arrow set, and they shoot the arrow past a bunch of microphones so that they could have the sound of it. You really could record it in mono and just pan it. But so yeah, that was an experiment, and in a way Loop is like that too. Linda got an early mini Moog, one of the first really sort of portable Moog synthesizers. I mean, they used to be a wall full of equipment, and this was just sort of a keyboard with the electronics inside it. And so they were playing around with it and jamming, and a lot of that went into what became Loop. And it's just so out there that I really like that too. You have an album that has Loop on one hand and Little Lamb Dragonfly on the other.
So different.
That's covering a lot of ground.
Yeah.
So anyway, what was yours?
Oh, I'm gonna get a lot of virtual tomatoes thrown. And you know what? I'm gonna change it because I think this album needs more justice, and it's Back to the Egg.
I love Back to the Egg.
Awesome.
How's that?
um,
For Back to the Egg, I think that Lawrence Juber is probably one of the best guitarists he's ever worked with. Exceptional guitarist.
Real and great interview. I mean,
oh yeah, you had him on, right?
Yeah, great interview.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just like you want to do it in a couple hours. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I love how Funky Reception opens the album. I think Getting Closer is probably my favorite Wings song. Yeah, but later period Wings, but that changes about every 10 minutes. I think We're Open Tonight is beautiful. I love the beautiful acoustic guitar work. Spin It On just speeds the album up, which I think is crazy. Again and again and again, which I think is really underrated. I love the You Don't Want to Be the Little Woman. I love that lyric. Old Siam Sir obviously has some of Paul's best vocals of all time. Error Through Me, which I think was the single, and which I think should have been a bigger hit. And I think that if you took Good Night Tonight and Daytime Nighttime Suffering, this would not be on this list. This would have been praised a lot more. And that's something that Lawrence Juber told me. He said that if you had that single on this album and took a couple songs off, and it would have just blown up and gone crazy. And dare I say it's my favorite McCartney album.
That's interesting. It is underrated, and in the classic sense of underrated but good. Yeah. In a way, it's my favorite incarnation of Wings, that lineup, and
I agree.
It didn't continue. Oh well.
Yeah, but I mean, I would have killed to be alive in 1979 and just see them tour. I mean, that would have been amazing. And I don't know anybody that did, but that person is lucky. I do think that side 2 could have had a couple more rockers just to keep the pace, but other than that, it's a perfect album. Yeah.
I like the video for it too, the sort of video album that he did at the time.
Yeah, that was really interesting. And I mean, Steve Hawley just goes crazy on the drums on this album, and it's just amazing. Like, if I had to choose an incarnation of Wings to see live, it would probably be this one. And great cover.
Good choice. Okay, so George.
Yeah, George.
Okay. With George, I think the big underrated album is Gontrapo.
Oh.
I really like Gontrapo. I have always liked Gontrapo since it came out. But I think the reason it's underrated, or that I say it's underrated, is that George did basically no promotion whatsoever. I mean, the thing appeared in the stores, and that was, a new George Harrison album. I mean, I haven't even heard about this, and then there were no interviews, no promotion, at least that I've run into. And it's as if he was just so disgusted with the record business that he just put out one album, didn't bother, and then basically went on vacation for 3 or 4 years until Cloud 9. But there's great stuff on here. Wake Up My Love is a great opener. That's the Way It Goes. I mean, that's a pretty classic Harrison song. I Really Love You is fun. Gontrapo in Greece, Dream Away.
I love that.
Yeah. And then Circles, which, goes all the way back to, I think he wrote that during the Beatles days.
Yeah, White. Wasn't it like a White Album outtake or something?
Yeah, I think isn't there an Esher version of it? I think there
Probably. But I think it's probably my least favorite Harrison album, but I think Harrison, out of all the Beatles, has the most consistent work. I think there's 6 albums that I would give a 10 out of 10 to. And they're all enjoyable to varying degrees. And I think that's the way it goes, is one of his best songs ever. And I really wish that we got something in between those years of Cloud 9 and Gontrapo, and in between Brainwashed, which, speaking of Brainwashed, my choice is Brainwashed for the most underrated album.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Do you think the fact that it came out like a year after he died is sort of worked against it in a way?
I think that, I think it gets overshadowed. Like Double Fantasy, I'm going to be completely honest, I think I've listened to the album 4 times, and I can't listen to it often because of the circumstances. I can only listen to select songs out on it at a time. That's just how I've always felt with that album. But we knew George was dying. I mean, I obviously wasn't around, but people knew. How long was it like that you guys kind of knew? Was it like a year-ish?
It was probably a year. Yeah. And then before that, he had been attacked.
Yeah.
So, in newspapers, they prepare obituaries of really famous people in advance.
Yeah.
And I had written his, I think it might have been around the time he was stabbed. It wouldn't have been much longer it wouldn't have been long after that if it was after it. And I revised it a couple of times, including, the morning he actually died. I went through it again and redid it. Everyone sort of was expecting it, but it still was in a way kind of shocking. I mean, expecting something doesn't make it less shocking once it happens. So, yeah. But Any Road, I think, is an incredible song.
That should have been a number 1. If that was a top 40 hit in the UK, I do believe.
I don't know. I don't know that he released a single at all from there, or I should say his estate.
Stuck Inside a Cloud was a release, I believe.
Okay.
Because in preparation, I actually went back and listened to the things we said today on this.
Really?
Yeah. And I feel like, and I think I remember Ken said something, but yeah, I know Paul's regarded Marwa Blues as being one of his favorite George songs of all time. And Stuck Inside a Cloud is beautiful. That one, actually, I didn't realize dated back quite a bit, but the lyrics sound like he's dying. Like it sounds like he's slowly dying. I mean, I've never smoked so much. Like that, those lyrics, and Looking for My Life. I mean, that is beautiful. And so it's poignant. I feel like this is the closest thing he's done to a Plastic Ono Band.
Okay.
I really do. I think
it was interesting when it came out, and they were providing review copies to the press. They were so paranoid about it leaking out that what they sent you was a portable CD player glued shut with the disc in it and the headphone glued into the headphone jack, so that there was nothing you could do to copy it. Actually, there was, but
you could have broken it.
I did. I ended up after I was finished with my review, I broke it open and just played it like a regular CD. I just don't like to be told I can't do something. You know how it is.
Yeah, I agree with you. And Rocking Chair in Hawaii dated back all the way to All Things Must Pass, I believe.
Hmm.
And Never Get Run So Far obviously was on the Eric Clapton Journeyman album, I believe.
Right.
Rising Sun and Run So Far are a little, I think Run So Far maybe a little too Jeff Linney for me, but still great.
Okay.
I love the snarkiness in the song Brainwashed. I think that even though the vocals are, I feel like as the record progresses, the vocals like get weaker. As I feel. I don't know why I've always looked at that, even though there's this weird thing with George's voice, and I don't remember if I've talked about it on the show before, that like as soon as Cloud 9 was over and he did the first Will Berry's album, that his voice really started to age, I feel, right after that. So
Okay.
I always question, like, did he have like some sort of cancer at that point? Because in like the She's My Baby song on the Wilburys Volume 3, you can kind of hear it start to get really nasally, and it's really weird. Not that it's bad, but it just starts to get a little weird.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he may have been compensating for, what he was feeling, physically / medically.
Yeah, but I think that if I'm gonna rank his albums, I rank this and All Things Must Pass side by side.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's that good.
Okay. Yeah. His entire output, relatively small as it is, also is pretty consistently good. It did occur to me to maybe consider Living in the Material World his most underrated.
I agree that's underrated too.
Yeah, it's Ken Michaels' favorite. Not only Harrison album, I think it's one of his favorite albums of all time.
It is his favorite album of all time.
And I think that in that case, I think what happened sort of was, everybody was really up for All Things Must Pass and the Concert for Bangladesh, which had a bunch of All Things Must Pass on it. But Living in the Material World seemed to have, okay, we're still doing the religious thing, and it sounded a little whiny to a lot of people, but I think it has survived that feeling, and I think now a lot of people have come to terms with it who really didn't like it that much when it came out. So I figured I'd go with Gon Troppo instead, just because people didn't even know it was there. So in a way, that's underrated by definition.
Yeah, I think it's still probably my least favorite Harrison album, but I think it's got its redeeming features. But Brainwashed, it's in my 20 favorite albums of all time.
Yeah, it's a good album.
It is, and I think it's better than Milk and Honey. I'm going to be completely honest. Milk and Honey and Sometime in New York City are probably the two weakest Lennon albums for me.
Okay.
I mean, they both needed better production. Like Brainwashed, when I first heard this album when I was probably 10, 11 years old, I mean, I'm 14 now, so that doesn't seem that long ago. And I know you heard it before it was even released. It doesn't sound like a posthumous release, and I didn't think it was until I realized it was.
Yeah.
But just great album.
I agree.
And I realized that vinyl's out of print again, I believe. And same with the all the Beatles albums now. All those stereo mixes are out of print.
Really?
Yeah, at least the early ones.
Wow. So you can't get the big EMI box set that came out in like 2010, or those are all gone?
They're gone.
Hmm.
I'll send you some screenshots later.
Okay.
Yeah, but moving on to the greatest, Ringo Starr. I know you're gonna approve of this. It's the most underrated Ringo Starr album.
Okay. Actually, a whole lot of his discography is underrated. I mean,
Yeah,
his recent stuff, no one seems to pay any attention to, and they're all perfectly fine albums. If you like Ringo's voice and if you like Ringo's choices of material, they've been consistent over the years. Um, and in the earlier years as well, people didn't seem to like Rotogravure and Bad Boy. I've put them on recently, and they're okay too. I don't know what the problem is, but the ones I chose, I've got two, and I'll just choose one. It would have to be Bukoops of Blues.
that was my runner-up.
That was your runner-up. My runner-up is Sentimental Journey.
Oh, I like that album too.
Yeah, Bukoops of Blues. A lot of people just sort of shrugged, when it came out. There's a much greater appreciation for country music today, I think, than there was when this came out
Yeah,
among rock audiences. Um, now a lot of people have country roots, including all of the Beatles.
yeah,
But it wasn't that clear. I mean, it should have been clear. They did all that Carl Perkins stuff in both on the records and BBC. Um, we should have known, but for some reason, real country stuff with a pedal steel, the whole deal, that just seemed a world apart from the Beatles. And Ringo, also as a Brit, seemed not the one to do it. You thought of country music as something that people in the southern US around Nashville recorded and
yeah,
did, sang, and that was their stuff. But Ringo sort of went there and did this. He got Pete Drake to play pedal steel. And I think we did know that Ringo had a yen for that. I mean, he was thinking of emigrating to Texas before the Beatles, all of that stuff. So we sort of knew that he was into it, but for some reason, because country music itself wasn't really being listened to, we just sort of shrugged it off. But it's actually a pretty good album. And
it really is.
yeah, uh, it's as if, he doesn't seem to count these first two albums. Sentimental Journey too. I suppose if I want to listen to standards, I'm probably going to put on an Ella Fitzgerald record. I'm probably not going to put on Ringo. But that said, I thought he did as good a job as he could on that. He got interesting arrangers to do the arrangements for it, including Paul did one. He had some jazz guys, Johnny Dankworth. The arrangements were good. The singing was, let's say, charismatic.
Yeah,
And he totally anticipated what would become a trend decades later, when everybody started doing albums of standards, including Paul, including Dylan. I'd
yeah.
rather listen to Sentimental Journey than to any of Dylan's
Oh,
albums. And I love Dylan. I really
okay.
love Dylan. Those
What's your favorite Dylan album?
Oh man. Um, God, maybe Highway 61, maybe Blonde on Blonde. I sort of lean towards Highway 61, but his last album I thought was great too.
I didn't.
No?
I really liked him, Tempest, though.
Tempest was good. Blood on the Tracks was great. I mean, he has these little peaks all through his discography, and then there are bunches of things where you say, what is he thinking? Self-Portrait at the time. At the time that came out, Self-Portrait was like synonymous with, like, it was a short way of saying the worst thing ever recorded in the history of humanity. You just needed to say Self-Portrait, and that's it. And then there was the one called Dylan, which was basically outtakes from Self-Portrait that Columbia
Yeah.
put out after he went to asylum. They put it out almost as a way of punishing him. That was embarrassing. But so, Sentimental Journey and Boucoups of Blues. Boucoups of Blues, there aren't really particularly songs that I would single out. On the CD, I kind of like the outtakes that were thrown on at the end, as Nashville Jam, things like that. But the Fastest Growing Heartache in the West, I mean, it's a very atmospheric, fun album that does capture that country thing and joins it to the Liverpudlian, vocal. It's kind of it's fun in that way. Don't listen to it every day or every week, but it's fun to put on every now and then. And I think it should have a better reputation than it does. People seem to behave as if Ringo's albums didn't really start until the Ringo album. But that's not true.
Yeah. So moving on to my pick, and I think I heard this in one show. I heard that this is one of your favorite Ringo albums. Stop and Smell the Roses.
Yep.
Coming off of the failures of Bad Boy and Critical, I mean, I don't care for Bad Boy. I don't care for Ringo the Fourth. I do really like Rotogravure. I think that one was not a failure at all. This bring back the whole get Ringo's friends and help them formula. I mean, Grow Old With Me would have been you would have had Beatles album, you would have had the Ringo formula. I love the song Private Property. I love Rack My Brain. Rack My Brain, I believe, was his last modest hit in the US. I think it got to number like 38 or something. Drumming Is My Madness is pure tongue-in-cheek genius, written by Harry Nilsson. I love the title track, even though he does sound very drunk. But I mean, he does sound drunk on all of the previous two albums, I think. I don't care for the Back Off Boogaloo redo. I will say that.
No.
We don't need any more redos. We can have like a compilation of Back Off Boogaloo redos.
Okay. Some of his recent remakes I've liked, though.
I thought the Wings remake was one of his greatest recordings ever in 2012.
Yeah. I like that album. Again, it's another one that was overshadowed by, well, John's death for one. Then Neil Bogart's death. I mean, the guy who ran the label that put that out.
Yeah.
And so, then the label basically died with him, and that became kind of hard to find as an album.
And I think it's one of the few albums that I think is in print from Ringo still. And it just got on Spotify within the last couple months, I realized. This and Old Wave weren't on Spotify.
Right. Huh.
But yeah.
Old Wave could be overlooked as well, or underrated, because it only came out in Germany and Canada at the time.
Yeah. That album, out of all of Ringo's albums, that's probably the one that I'm least familiar with. Interestingly enough. But
by Joe Walsh.
Yeah. Yeah. But just really great album and so overlooked. I mean, I love You Belong to Me. I love Dead Giveaway. I mean, if Grow Old With Me, Nobody Told Me, which I don't think would have worked as Ringo songs personally. But if those were on here as Ringo songs, this would have been probably considered a Ringo, like that, held to that standard.
Right.
And if I'm ranking his albums, Time Takes Time is probably my number one. The Ringo album's probably my number two. This might be my number 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
But so, Alan, what have you got coming up, and what would you like to plug?
I like to plug. Um, I guess what I've got coming up is, we're now working on volume 2 of the book. That's taking, for both of us, it's taking an awful lot of our time. Basically, it's our main focus. Um, and, with COVID, it was the perfect time to be doing it because there weren't concerts to review. So I had basically, was just sort of trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to keep doing my regular work plus the book, or what? And with COVID sort of canceling the concert seasons, that just meant, okay, fine, I really can just focus on this. And in fact, maybe I won't even do records. So I wrote to all my editors and said, look, I'm working on a book, and they understand that, and I'll let you know when I'm done. Which in most cases I didn't do, because it's working on a book is it's a different kind of focus than doing a different concert review every day, or a record review or something like that. It's really sort of a long-term big arch, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, I've done other books, but this was different in a lot of ways. Adrian is an incredible researcher, and we've both been doing interviews. So, we've got some more interviews to do for book 2, and we've got a lot of reading and sorting through documents and then listening to all the stuff. So that's what I'm looking forward to, in the immediate future. It's a little early to plug book 1 because it's not coming out till 2022. So other than that, I don't think I really have anything to plug. I mean, so.
Do you want to talk a little bit about things we said today?
Okay, what do you want to know?
Just kind of say where you can find it, how you can contact the show.
Sure. Okay. It's on Podbean and YouTube and iTunes. We have a Things We Said Today page on Facebook, and also Things We Said Today Beatles radio fans on Facebook, and I post links to the shows there every 2 weeks. We do them now. And our next one that we will record, I think, on this coming Monday, will be about the anniversary of RAM. So we'll have a lot to say about that. And I think we may also look at Denny Sywell's new recording of, the RAM tribute, RAM On, it's called. He and a bunch of other people, including David Spinoza, who played briefly on the RAM sessions too, sort of made a remake of RAM.
I heard it, and it's really good.
Yeah. And so we'll probably talk about that too. If not, we'll just be talking about the RAM album itself. Don't know what else we have planned. It's kind of funny. I mean, sometimes we have several weeks planned where we have guests, and sometimes we're sort of doing it by the seat of our pants. Like the show will end, and we'll say, okay, well, what do we do in 2 weeks? And we'll either come up with something right then, or we'll email each other during the week and come up with something. There's never any lack of stuff to talk about when it comes to the Beatles.
Yeah. And I mean, it's crazy, but I want to thank you for coming on, and you can find our show anywhere where podcasts can be heard, YouTube, and yeah,